Hey there, I'm Darkest, and today's video is going to be a little different than usual. I usually publish these videos as highlights from my Twitch streams, but for this challenge, since it's such a long one and I was running into some issues that were very frustrating, I decided to do a little commentary and give some tips of how I was able to fix some of these issues. So firstly, I want to preface this by saying I'm not a ranged player, and I'm definitely not a healer. But some of the things I did might not be the most optimal for an experienced disc player, but it's the things that kind of just help me get through the challenge. Firstly, the talents I was running. The two most important ones that are mandatory for this challenge were Mindbender and Psychic Voice, and the reason is because those are going to be your two stops for the Fell Burst cast. For damage talents, I took Schism, Sins of the Many, and Purge the Wicked. Schism lines up really well with the worm burn phases. Sins of the Many just does passive damage, and Purge the Wicked because I didn't need to run Divine Star because I was running a trinket that I'll get into later. And for defensive talents, I took Masochism and Lenience. Masochism was a slight DR whenever I was about to take damage from a Fell Burst, and Lenience because the other two didn't seem relevant for a solo content challenge. I would recommend going to Emerald Nightmare and killing the first boss on all 4 difficulties until you get a Ravaged Seed Pod to drop. The reason I didn't take Divine Star was because the Ravaged Seed Pod would solo all the eggs for me. I was running into an issue P1 where I was doing too much damage to Tugar with Atonement Healing and him walking into the Ravaged Seed Pods. So I found stopping damage on him at around 50% to be the more consistent way to milk as much damage as you can into the worm before Tugar ticks down. The most frustrating issue I ran into during this challenge is that for Disc Priest, your stops on the Fell Burst cast are your Psychic Scream, and you can drop a Mindbender and Fade, which will cause Tugar to cast the Fell Burst onto your Mindbender instead of you. The issue is that you have to pre-Mindbender the Fell Burst cast before it targets you, and Tugar will sometimes spell Q Fell Burst before the Earthquake, as shown here. If this happens, you have to immediately paint up yourself and start thinking about how you're going to resync his casts up. The way the spell queuing is supposed to line up is he will cast a Fell Burst while the worm is active that you Psychic Scream, and then cast Earthquake when the worm transitions, and then after that Earthquake cast his second Fell Burst, which you pre-Mindbender. During the fight, each Earthquake cast gets longer than the last one, and that is how I was able to resync his casts up. The way the timeline worked for my fight was he Fell Burst before the Earthquake, so I paints up that cast. Then I knew he was going to cast another Fell Burst during the egg phase, so I pre-Mindbender that one to get it on cooldown earlier. The next Fell Burst cast was a Psychic Scream interrupt, and then ideally your Mindbender CD is coming off cooldown during the Earthquake cast so you can resync everything up. My Mindbender was not off cooldown, so I had to barrier that cast, and then after that everything was resynced up. It is also very important you don't get spell locked on either of your School of Magics during the Worm's Sonic Scream cast. It happened to me a few times and it was almost lethal, and definitely something I should have improved on throughout the fights. Tugar periodically puts a debuff on you that you have to basically instantly dispel, or it does a lot of damage to you, and so if you're kicked on Holy, you can't dispel that. And then what happens to me here is I get locked on Shadow, which means that I can't Psychic Scream the next Fell Burst cast. Luckily, I had a Rapture up and was able to just barely live this. And lastly, I recommend breaking as many scales as early as possible as you can. The way it works is the boulders will spawn in a triangle formation, and immediately when the phase starts, he'll do 1 charge. So you want to position yourself between the worm and either a line of the triangle or 2 of the points, and he'll charge through it, breaking off 2 scales during the first charge. Then he'll do a second charge, which is a little bit harder to line up through 2 of them, so it is recommended that you do 2 at the first charge and then clean up the last one during the second charge. Mechanically, this fight didn't have much going on with it, but granted I've also done it on multiple other classes at this point, so I have the basics mechanics learned, but for me it was very frustrating because I felt like there wasn't many things I could do as a player better. Just came down to the Tugar casts RNG being an incredibly frustrating mechanic to play around, and then I was trying to come up with, like, you know, optimizations to resync it up, and, like, you know, should I fear this one early? Should I fear this cast late? Do I let this one go off or not? It was just very annoying to me, and I haven't really heard a lot of videos like talking about, you know, that particular mechanic, so that's kind of why I'm making this commentary over it. This is something new for me. I've never really done like a commentary video, and honestly, a lot of the earlier things I deleted, re-recorded a bunch of times. This is kind of like just unscripted right this part, but I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, come hang out on my Twitch channel. I appreciate it if you do that, and I hope you have good luck on this challenge. It was definitely annoying for me, and I hope a lot of the little tips and tricks I suffered through a lot of pulls to come up with will help you out in the future. Again, sorry if this is a weird, cringy commentary. I'm not used to this, but I appreciate you listening and watching these videos. Okay, 25% HP. I just can't hit him at all anymore. That was so annoying. The fucking desyncing of the spells is so tragic. The spell queuing, and it desyncs your fucking stops. It's so fucking annoying. Blizzard, fix this.